So I think the first question on everyone's minds is how do you plan to address the Conley and Kennedy report, and in particular, addressing the harassment of female members?
Everyone inside the TSSA knew that there was a problem for a long time. In fact, sometimes the reputation of the problems within the TSSA went outside of our union and were understood to exist amongst other trade unions within the TUC, within the labour movement. So what came out in the Kennedy and Conley reports was not really surprising to staff, didn't make it any easier to read. Since those reports came out, we've had an interim General Secretary, an interim President, an interim Treasurer that have come in to manage the change, to get rid of the old practices and to fully implement all of the changes recommended in those reports. Obviously, I'm 100% behind all of those changes. I'm one of the female members of staff that faced harassment and bullying in my workplace. And as a trade unionist, you expect better when you work for a trade union. It was really difficult. I had to use all of my skills as a trade unionist to keep my job and to outlast the person who was bullying me. It wasn't just staff that were being harassed. Sometimes the senior management team spoke really badly about members and reps and were actually borderline abusive to them as well. We as staff were stopped from talking to the executive committee and stopped from talking to members and reps about what was happening in our workplace. So a lot of them didn't actually know, although they understood that there were some problems. The interim senior management team have done a really good job in starting the change. It's been quite amazing how quickly they've managed to turn things around, but the challenge going forward is to make sure that the new better practices are fully embedded in the trade unions so that we don't slip back to the bad old days.
So a bit of a controversial one. Many TSSA members have raised concerns about the salary of the General Secretary. I just wondered if you had any plans to address those concerns if you were elected.
Certainly. At the TSSA, we operate on a series of pay scales, bands 1 to 4, and they're negotiated through our recognised trade union, the GMB. It was my perhaps naive assumption that the General Secretary would probably be working at something like the top of those pay scales. When we found out the amount of money that was spent on the previous General Secretary, we were absolutely shocked and horrified. I can't see any justification for the General Secretary of the TSSA to earn the sort of money that this job's been advertised at. I'm not at all money motivated. I've left really high paying jobs to go and work for less than what my annual bonus would have been because I believe it's the right thing to do. If I'm working in a sector that helps people, that is actually more important to me than money in the bank, although, obviously everyone needs to pay their bills. So what I would do is I would suggest that the General Secretary should be at the top of the highest pay scale at the most, and that everyone who's working in the senior management team ought to be somewhere underneath that, probably. It might take a bit of time. I never asked for the salary that's advertised for the General Secretary. It was decided by the EC. It might take a bit of time to get some rule changes in place, but what I would propose to do is until such time that the pay issue is addressed, I would like to use the excess money, which is how I see the money as it's advertised compared to what I thought the job was likely to be worth. I would use that to set up a strike fund so that going forward, when we have more industrial action, our members are not constrained by lack of resources and can participate in industrial action until we win their battles for them.
So a bit of a personal one now, and it's pretty shocking, but some of your opponents have suggested that your disability should disqualify you from standing. What would you say to those people?
I'm absolutely flabbergasted that a trade unionist could come up with such an ableist comment. I have been supporting our members in Scotland for the last 2.5 years, and in that time I've helped make it the most successful division in the whole of the union. We are growing members and we are not seeing turnover of members, they're staying put, even though in Scotland we already had quite a high density of railway staff. So we've done a really good job in Scotland, but prior to that I used to organise for GTR and South Western Railway. GTR is the largest train operating company in the UK. And in that work, I was campaigning for protections when COVID was obviously going to land. And part of the work I did there was to ensure that there was proper ventilation installed in ticket offices, because At the start of the pandemic, we knew that it was being spread through the air, and we were being advised to remember to wash our hands regularly to keep transmission of the virus as low as possible. I actually ultimately managed to get new ventilation system put in at Victoria Ticket Office with the help of the Office of Rail and Road. And I would continue to make sure that our members are protected. At Victoria, unfortunately, before we managed to get the new ventilation system put in, one of my members and my industrial rep at Victoria were assaulted in the station at work. And one of them, Belly Majinga, obviously went on to die really sadly of the COVID pandemic. And my rep ended up in hospital with it, really seriously ill. And I think that it's our first job to look after the vulnerable. And as a trade unionist, if we're not protecting people's health and safety, especially when there is a brand new pandemic that's really scary, and at the time we didn't really know how to manage the virus, and it's not over yet. A lot of our frontline members are clinically extremely vulnerable, will have suppressed immune systems and be of an older age and be more at risk if they should contract COVID. I really think that we need to be focusing on protecting the rights of disabled workers, and that includes if they happen to work for a trade union. My reduced immune system hasn't impacted on my ability to do my job. In fact, I've done a very good job in building our union. And I will commit, and I will be the most present and visible General Secretary TSSA has had in decades. I will be out there as well campaigning for more COVID protection. I want to see HEPA filtration and proper ventilation in our members' workplaces as well as in TSSA offices, because the pandemic's not gone, and it's an absolute certainty that even when it is gone, there will be another one, and we need to be prepared for that to look after the health and safety of our members and our staff so that we don't lose any more. We lost far too many during the pandemic, and we need to really be protecting people. Having been through that experience of being clinically extremely vulnerable to this pandemic, I think I'm in a good place to understand and recognise where there are issues, but I will absolutely be out there undertaking all the roles and all the duties that would be expected of a General Secretary at TSSA.
So there's rumoured to be some candidates in this election from outside the sector. Could you tell us what your connections are to the transport sector and also to the trade union movement?
Sure thing. I was raised in the trade union movement, protesting and campaigning for all of our public services. And I've raised my children in exactly the same way. My first job was working for London Underground, where I was in the engineering directorate and working on the Jubilee Line extension project. When I had the opportunity nearly 7 years ago now to start working for TSSA, which combined my experience of the railway and my absolute passion for trade unionism and fighting for workers' rights, it felt like coming home. It was really nice. I was very glad to do it. I worked with Neil Finlay and other leaders of trade unions in Scotland to produce a report making the economic and environmental case to protect the railway. We presented that report to Holyrood and got acclaim from MSPs from across the political spectrum, because no one can argue that we do need our railway to function as an economy and for the environment.
So one of the problems that a lot of trade unions are facing is the declining numbers of young members, joining trade unions, despite being one of the groups of people that need them the most. So what would you do to engage more young members and get more young people involved in the union?
Trade union membership has fallen since about the 1980s following successive governmental attacks on trade unions. But at the same time, what we've seen is an ageing membership of trade unionism. Gone is the time when people left school, they started to work where their parents were, and on day one they joined the trade union. That generational link has been broken, and we need to address this seriously. Within the trade union movement, a lot of members now, because that link has been broken, are getting older, and in the railway, with a number of people being offered voluntary redundancy, a lot of people in the older demographic are choosing to take that at the moment, which means that we risk seeing our membership fall off a cliff edge if we don't tackle this. We need to prove ourselves to be a vibrant union that wants to represent younger workers. At the same time as trade union membership has fallen, so has pay, so has terms and conditions, and we've seen an increase in job instability. And all of those problems impact younger workers more than they do anyone else. So actually, they probably, arguably, need to be members of a trade union more than anybody else. So what we must do is offer a new, vibrant offering. As General Secretary, I would be looking to recruit a special young person and equalities officer, and I'd work with future TSSA to make sure that that is a priority amongst across our union. I think we also need to step outside of the comfort zone of the usual media. We need to make use of the social media tools that younger people are using. Facebook and Twitter are for older people now. My own children take the mickey out of me because apparently only boomers use Facebook nowadays, but there we are. We need to start looking at Snapchat, we need to look at TikTok, we need to be putting out videos, but more importantly than any of that, we need to listen to what young people need and make sure that we can represent them properly in their workplace and show them that there is value in joining us. As I say, after all, they are the most vulnerable in our workplaces.
Speaking of young people and the future of the trade union, environmental concerns are quite important to a lot of TSSA members. So what environmental policies would you be looking to kind of champion?
Public transport remains the most environmentally friendly way to move people around the country. But we should also be looking at moving freight off of lorries and putting it on the railway to reduce the overall pollution level in the country. Seems to me a no-brainer that we need to be campaigning on environmental policies. I would like to see diesel trains taken off the rails so that we've got a fully electrified railway. And I also think we need to see investment in renewable energy for our railway so that we can start making it absolutely carbon neutral. And of course, the investment for doing that will be available once we are no longer paying profits to shareholders, and that money is able to be reinvested back into the railway network, making it even more sustainable than it already is. The environment has an impact as well on our railway. Because of climate change, we've seen events such as cuttings being washed away. And in fact, the Stonehaven crash was caused because of an extreme weather event. There have also been a number of times that power cables and things have been taken down by extreme weather. So protecting the environment also protects our railway and makes it safer for the staff that are working on it and for the passengers that are travelling on it. So therefore, it makes absolute sense to continue campaigning for environmental issues. And actually, at the most recent TSSA conference, there was a motion about campaigning for the environment, which was passed. And as General Secretary, it's my job to represent the views and demands and wishes of our members. So I think, given that that was passed at conference, we absolutely do need to prioritise it and incorporate it into all of our wider campaigns.
And what will your relationship be like with other trade unions, and how will you work with other trade unions?
After a lifetime of being active in the trade union movement, I've established good relationships with a number of trade union leaders, both within the transport industry and beyond in the wider trade union movement. I've taken part and led in pay talks where quite often we're negotiating with officials from ASLEF, the RMT and Unite. And by working together and speaking before those meetings, we were able to combine our strategies to ensure we each get the best results for our respective members. It's really important that we maximise our leverage in negotiations because we're expecting some upheaval in the transport industry. And with the wider economy in the state it's in at the moment, there are likely to be some major challenges. So it's really, really important that we combine strategies and find a way to win for every one of our members.
So to sum up, Bonnie, what kind of General Secretary would you be?
I would first of all insist that there was proper transparency within the union and also boost the democracy of our union to make sure that all of our members' voices are heard. I would work hard to try and get as many of our members actively engaged in campaigns that we're running and make sure that those campaigns are the very campaigns that our members need to see for their workplaces. I guess what I'm saying is I would remember our history. We're 126 years old. We've done some good things, but I will also secure our future by making it a more vibrant and more powerful trade union.
Brilliant. Thank you.